You're listening to Sharky on sharkgoeschomp. I want to thank my subscribers for breaking the 50 mark, my first 50 subscribers. So tonight, I present 3 stories submitted by subscribers. And just as a reminder, you can email me your own stories at stories4sharky@gmail.com. The Doll, submitted by Jane. Growing up, I used to collect porcelain dolls. I loved them. I would get one every year for my birthday until I became a teenager and wanted other things instead. All the dolls stayed on the shelves of my bookcase, minus the one that hung from the ceiling on a swing. I loved them, and I didn't have any fear of them. Well, that was until my parents moved us into a much larger home. At the old house, I shared a room with my sister, but when we moved, I finally got my own room. I was in 7th grade and around 13 years old. We had lived in the house for about 2 months when things started happening. We had 2 living rooms, a beautifully decorated one that we hardly went into as it was reserved for guests, and then the main family room. At the time, I had a Dalmatian named Kona, and he would stand at the entrance of the guest room while whimpering and growling. I could not find any reason for his odd behavior. He started doing the same thing in my bedroom. Strange things would happen all over the house, such as shadows, voices, mists, etc. But most of this activity happened in my bedroom, to which I did my best to ignore, until one night. I was sleeping on my bed with Kona beside me when I felt the bed dip inwards like someone had sat down on the mattress. I kept my eyes closed in fear, not daring to look. I heard a little girl's giggle. Then the bed raised back up. Terrified, I slowly opened one eye and saw the channels on my TV box changing when the remote was on my nightstand. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I quickly looked over and saw one of my dolls was moving. As I watched in horror, the one on the swing started to move as the sound of porcelain on porcelain could be heard from the other dolls on the shelf. Needless to say, I didn't stick around to see which one had moved. I jumped up and ran down the hall into my sister's and slept there for the rest of the night. That was the last night I had those dolls in my room because I had packed them all away the very next day. We moved from that house when I was a sophomore in high school, but my parents never gave us a reason as to why we decided to move. But I'm guessing that I wasn't the only one who had experienced some strange encounters there. Thanks for reading my story. Oh, I also want to add one more thing. A couple months ago, I had a dream about that house, particularly my old bedroom. In the dream, I had visited my old house for some strange reason. It was like a calling to return. I brushed it off as soon as I awoke, but I did find it quite odd, as I hadn't thought about that house in years. House Beside a Graveyard, submitted by Natasha. Hi, Sharky! Okay, this is not the best choice in somewhere to live, but it did beat the hell out of the trailer I was currently living in at that time. The activity in this home started once I had settled into my new home. At night, there would be this really big shadow that my family and I would all see, making its way around the house. It wasn't threatening, but more like someone who was on watch, just keeping an eye on things. That one was a reassuring presence. Now the other ones in the house, not so much. We were able to distinguish at least 3, a young boy, an older male, and an elderly woman. The boy simply played pranks, moving things from here to there, causing us to have to hunt for things like keys or objects that we had recently placed down. The other male became violent towards my oldest son and his fiancée when they started arguing, and both of them ended up with a few bruises. The elderly woman attacked a visitor in my home through a mirror that was already in the bathroom when I had moved in here. I made the mistake of moving it into one of the bedrooms. According to my guest, she had appeared behind her and began to choke her, which left her with scratches down her neck and her back. The mirror was immediately removed. After that happened, I straight up told the spirits that we had to come to an agreement, that they had to quit attacking people in my home, or I would have no choice but to remove them. Now, if they left us alone, I would leave them alone. The next morning, I found the word "deal" written on plastic that I had hanging over the sliding glass doors. So far, there haven't been any more instances of activity since that time, and that was over a year ago. Protective Fathers, submitted by Sadie. My ex and I have known each other for 21 years. We grew up next to each other, so I have known his family all my life, and he knows mine. He was home for leave from the army, and he called me at around 12 a.m. after landing from his flight. I hadn't seen him in a few months, so when he picked me up, we went back to his house. We were the only ones there since his mom was at his sister's place. So for reasons I don't exactly recall, we don't go to his room. Instead, we go into the spare room, and where we eventually fell asleep. The door had been left ajar, and the hall light was on. Sometime during the night, I was randomly woken up, and I wasn't sure why. I glanced over to my ex and saw that he was passed out next to me, and yet I felt like someone was watching me. I looked to the doorway and saw a tall, dark shadow. I couldn't make out a face, but I knew it was watching me. It felt familiar, and somehow I just knew it was his late father, who died of a heart attack when he was just 13. I have no idea how long I sat there watching the shadow of my ex's father. I didn't feel threatened, so I just watched. I couldn't look away. Then it took a step towards me, and I gasped loudly. The ex sat up in bed and was ready to jump to my rescue, thinking someone had broken in. I told him what I saw, and he said I was probably just dreaming. He got up to use the restroom, came out minutes later, grabbed me and the car keys, and we left his house. It was like 3 a.m. As we drove the 2 hours to his sister's house, he told me what he saw. He had just finished washing his hands and turned around to dry his hands on the towel behind him. That was when he heard the sink faucet turn on. He turned back around and saw it shut off right in front of him. He was so freaked out that he didn't want to stay there for the remainder of the night, so we had left. After that night, I would always feel as if someone were watching me at his house, especially when no one would be around. This is Sharky with sharkgoeschomp. Thank you for listening to tonight's stories and for submitting your own. Please subscribe for more stories. And once again, you can send me your stories at stories4sharky@gmail.com. Have a good night.